Hey guys, so after I filmed my overview where I broke down how I make my drum covers, I got a lot of questions about how I go about learning the songs, because I did mention in that video, of course, that I do have to learn them note for note. So to answer all of your questions on that, I simply learn every song by ear. So when learning a song by ear, there's a few techniques that I use to figure out what exactly is going on in certain parts. One of the techniques I use is perspective pans. So I'm going to explain to you what perspective pans are and how I use them to figure out what's going on in certain parts of certain songs. So first, there's a couple terms I need to get you familiar with because I'm going to use them later in the video. Those terms are mono, stereo, and pan. If you know what the difference is between mono and stereo, and you understand panning, and you don't need a definition on these, then feel free to jump forward to the timestamp on your screen now. If you're still watching from this point, odds are good that you either know what those are and you would just like a quick refresher, or you have not heard them before, and I'm going to teach you the basics of them right now. So we're going to start with mono and stereo. According to Google, mono uses one, stereo uses more than one. In monaural sound, one single channel is used. It can be reproduced through several speakers, but all speakers are still reproducing the same copy of the signal. In stereophonic sound, more channels are used, typically two. The reason why it's typically two is because we have two ears. To visualize this really quickly, to give you an example of how you can figure out if you're listening to a mono or a stereo track, take a pair of stereo headphones. Almost all modern headphones purchased are going to be stereo. Listen to a sound file through these headphones. If the sound file is exactly the same in both ears, you're hearing the same volumes and the same elements in both ears, odds are good that that's a mono sound file. If you're listening to a sound file through your stereo headphones again, and you are hearing different levels in each ears and different elements in each ears, then odds are good that you are listening to a stereo sound file. Moving on from mono and stereo, we're now quickly going to talk about panning. Again, according to Google, panning is the spread of a monaural signal in a stereo or multi-channel sound field. It is critical to the makeup of the stereo image. Panning adds space in a mix through panning the instrument's center, left, and right. So, to sum that up for you, panning is the actual sort of tool or act of placing different elements in each of those ears in a stereo mix. So, now that we're up to speed on stereo, mono, and pan, next thing we're going to talk about sort of the meat and potatoes of this video, which is perspective pans. When you're listening to a piece of music that has a drum set involved in it, typically that drum set's going to be set up in a perspective pan, one of two perspectives. There is audience perspective and drummer perspective. If the drum mix is set up in an audience perspective pan, that means that while you're listening to the piece of music, the drums are panned in a way that gives you the illusion that you are standing in the audience looking directly forward at a drum set. What this means for my drum set is that you're going to hear that in the mix, the hi-hat more pronounced in your right ear and the china more pronounced in the left ear. That's because if you were an audience member and you were looking directly at me while I'm playing, then the hi-hat is going to be to the right side of the drum set and the china cymbal is going to be to the left side of the drum set. That's audience perspective panning. Now, the other perspective that we're going to talk about is drummer perspective. Drummer perspective or stage perspective is super simple. It's just the reverse. Instead of watching the drum set from the front, you are now sitting at the drum set or directly behind the drum set. When you have a mix that's in drummer perspective, it means that for my drum set, the hi-hat is going to be in your left ear because my hi-hat is on the left side of my drum set when I'm sitting at the throne. My china is at the far right side of the drum set, so the china cymbal is going to be panned to the right or will be played in the right ear. Same rule applied to the floor tom. The floor tom is directly to the right, so that is going to be louder in your right ear. Now, just because something is all the way to the left or all the way to the right doesn't mean it's not going to show up in the other ear as well. You are going to have a little bit of hi-hat in the right ear, even if the hi-hat's more predominant in the left ear. All right, now we're here inside Logic X, and on the left here, as you see marked, I have drummer perspective pans set up for these tracks, and I have audience perspective pans set up for the tracks on the right. So you can see while we're sitting in the drummer perspective point of view, we have the rack tom is panned out to the left, specifically at -29. My floor tom is panned out to the right, specifically at +37. And then my right and left overheads are +63 all the way to the right and -64 all the way to the left. So first I'm going to play for you drummer perspective, and then I'm going to let it play right on through into audience perspective. And when it reverses the pans, you're going to hear the difference between drummer perspective and audience perspective. In order to really tell the difference though, you have to listen to this on a stereo pair of headphones. You can't really listen to this on your laptop speakers or on your cell phone speakers and really get a sense of it because it's not isolating each ear. So as you can see now, the pans are reversing themselves and we are now in audience perspective. The real big things to notice when you listen through those is that the hi-hat is far more pronounced in one ear versus the other when you roll through. Same with the China in this last fill. There's a China that sort of shows up here. You can even tell by the waveform that this is the right overhead because the China is a bit louder right there. That's the China hit right there, whereas it's not quite as pronounced in the left overhead track. And then, of course, you can kind of hear in the rack tom and floor tom during this fill, it moved from left to right and then reverse itself for the audience perspective pans. So why is all of this important? Why does any of this matter, and how does it actually help you learn a song? What I do sometimes, if I'm having a really hard time figuring out what's going on in a section of a song, I will go online, I will look up the drummer that I am covering. So if I'm doing an Ask Alexandria track, I'll look up James Cassell's and I'll take a look at what he has in his drum set. I'll try and find a picture that was from a tour that was touring the song that I'm learning, because sometimes year to year drummers add and take away things from their sets. So I try and find a picture of the set that is most relevant to the song that I'm working on. Once I have that picture, I then just look at the set. If the hi-hat's on the left and there's only one hi-hat and it's on the left, then I can listen to the mix and distinguish, okay, is the hi-hat on the left or the right? If it sounds like the hi-hat's more on the right, but he has his hi-hat set up on the left, then that means that it's audience perspective. So that's how you kind of figure out which perspective it is. Once you figure out which perspective it is, then you can just sort of look at that picture as a reference and then listen really closely to the mix. If you determine that a certain drum mix is in drummer perspective and you come to a certain section where all of a sudden you're hearing sort of a cymbal in your left ear, odds are he's using his left crash. Or if you get to a part where you know that his China is on the right side of the drum set and you know it's in drummer perspective, but you hear a China sounding cymbal during a fill, well, maybe that's a stack that he has pan center because there's a stack in the center of his kit, or whatever the case may be. So I really hope that this video helped you. If there's a certain song that you can't find very many covers on and you want to learn it on your own and you don't have a transcription of it, well, then you can use this technique to sort of help you along figuring it out if you have resorted to learning it by ear. Thanks so much for checking out this video. As always, feel free to connect with me further at any of my social media pages. I have all the links listed in the description below. I did, as you noticed, take this week off drumming. However, I will be back next week with a new cover and a new lesson video. Once again, thank you so much, and I will see you guys very soon with something new.